This session is upgrading SUSE OpenStack Cloud. And the jokey title, Taking the Strain, is just a reference to the point that unlike many open source projects you might be paying support for, SUSE take support during upgrades very, very seriously. And we do whatever we can to automate it, to make it as good as possible for you. Okay? And we'll go through and focus in on that technology. I'm Simon Briggs. I work in the UK, it's a British accent you're listening to, as the Europe, Middle East and African specialist for the sales organization around OpenStack. So I'm really a sales engineer, that's my role, but I specialize around OpenStack. The reason being that my sales force, my SEs that are out in countries like France and Sweden and whatever, they have to sell all the product sets. So that's quite a lot of stuff, okay? Linux has 2,500 applications in it. OpenStack's doing networking and storage and Linux. You know, there's quite a lot of stuff to know. So I'm a specialist to help those guys out. simon.briggs@suse.com. Email me if you want to ask questions. I'm always willing to have a conversation about OpenStack. Cool. Right, so what are we going to do here? We're going to talk through why you would upgrade your platform, because part of this is a pitch to my customers to say you have to upgrade, okay? And then we're going to look at why that might be a little bit tricky around clouds, particularly OpenStack. There's a nodding head there. Somebody's gone through one or two of these. We'll go into a few technical details. I will advertise a session tomorrow on the hands-on. One of the developers actually designed and ran through the software for this script. He's going through a detailed hands-on. So I'm not going to replicate what he's doing, obviously, but if you want to get into the weeds and actually look at the tech, then I advise you going along there. Then we'll obviously review and have questions. Got to underline, when I talk about our roadmap, which I will in this, it might change. We're an open source company. Things do drift a little. And that's our caveat. So why would you upgrade a cloud? To be honest, you have to. I know it's software, but things age and change takes place. Why does that happen? Well, if you want to be an augmented platform, you've got to add new pieces, haven't you? Okay, so partly is because physical, mechanical things wear out, okay? So all right, it's software, but it runs on something that's physical at the end of the day. And physical mechanics do break down eventually. Also, software's flawed. I know I work for SUSE, and we should pretend the world's all rosy. There's a great anecdote that does the rounds in the industry in the UK, and that is the idea that a bloke's just got from a top university. Cambridge is the top university for technology in the UK. And he's just come out of Cambridge and he's got his degree and he feels, got a first class honours degree, feels very powerful. And he goes to work as a software developer, wants to, so he goes to an interview. And the manager thinks, oh God, not another jumped up student coming in telling me what to do. But this guy was at Cambridge for a reason, he's quite clever. And the old manager said, I'll test his mettle. And he sat there and he says, if I gave you 1,000 lines of code, how many bugs would you find? Have you heard the anecdote? The guy came back with a response, half of them. That's a fact. There is bugs in code, yeah? And you need to update, particularly in the open source world. Don't ever forget to update your platforms, particularly if security fixes are out there, etc. And you need to do major version upgrades as well to follow this path. All software is weak. I know I shouldn't talk about this, but it's the truth. It's an attack zone. It has weaknesses. Things can be done to it. With all the movements forward in technology, we're actually creating more gaps as we go forward. So you've got to backfill those gaps as you realize them. I didn't know how to spell Kubernetes 5 years ago, and now it's an attack vector on my OpenStack cloud that I run. That's partly a reason why you need to upgrade. And of course, you want to get updated feature sets, so new capability. I've taken that picture of the Terminator away here because this is a plea from your software vendor, yeah? We need you to move forward on the versions as well because we can't afford to run a business where we support code that's 10 years old, yeah? We have to support code, well, we do support code that's 20 years old. Let's say 20 years old. The Linux is supported a long time. But we need you to move forward so we can keep the product working forward and make a profit and remain in business to satisfy the contracts that you guys sign with us. So it's a bit of a plea. So where does OpenStack sit in the world of SUSE? Okay, it sits in this diagram, the architecture slide we're very proud of. Okay, so SUSE OpenStack Cloud sits on top of physical hardware, obviously, the thing that wears out and forces us up. It utilizes virtualization technologies. You're probably aware of what OpenStack has the ability to do because you're sitting in this session, so I won't explain it too much. But obviously, there's a whole product set around this technology as well. So the upgrade path does become quite critical. What is SUSE doing? This is part of the lifecycle view. We're very quickly going to walk through it. What I want to do is keep you aware of one large challenge that SUSE has as a software vendor. So our version lifecycle for the major versions, we release one annually, okay? The upstream, yeah, across the top, the OpenStack upstream is getting recycled every 6 months presently. They are moving to an annual one. But from SUSE's point of view, we used to track the 6 month like the other vendors in the market. And that makes sense with a very juvenile open source project. Because if you think of the level of change that's happening in any open source project, there's a lot at the start and then it levels out as you go forward. And we felt in our version 6 time zone that we were getting to the point where there was features coming down the line that weren't that radical, so we wanted to adopt a more commercially understandable support model. So if we are doing a 6 monthly release, we could actually only support, because we need to only support a few versions of our product, we could only actually support for about 1.5 to 2 years, depending on what version, 1.5 when we started out, and then things closed up a bit. We've now moved to 3-year support. So SUSE OpenStack 9 is released at the end of the month. There was an announcement this week about it, and that version will have full 3 years support for you. And that's what we had to do to go to the year of the release. But obviously, when you're talking about upgrade, there's a challenge because features are being added in all the way along here. And we will talk about the physical challenges from 7 to 8 because you've got the Newton code base moving to Pike, and there's a step in between Queens that caused some complication, and we'll go into that in more detail. Now we've got the lovely name train coming down the tracks, so like that. Coming in the future. So obviously we don't know the rest of the alphabet, but they're going to run out of letters soon, so I don't know what they're going to do then. If you are using our OpenStack, you might be using our storage solution, Ceph-based. Are you guys using Ceph? Are you using the SUSE Ceph? Or?
No,
okay.
We're looking at it for our next upgrade. That's what we're looking to tie it into.
Excellent. Well, importantly, you've got to be aware of that life cycle fits. You know, I always make the joke in England, they're fish and chips. Yeah, they go together well. In America, it might be jelly and peanut butter, or, you know, how things fit together really well. There is a version challenge as you're moving forward. But SUSE actually, in its version 7, unlinked or separated the storage from the OpenStack itself. So you build them both together and then just integrate, whereas previously we tried to deploy at the same time in a kind of involved manner. And that, although that worked fine for OpenStack, it annoyed the hell out of the system administrators that were doing the storage. So we were falling out with storage engineers all the time, and we don't want to fall out with people, so we separated the two. But stay aware, you're also upgrading an operating system as you're moving forward as well. Now, that at the moment lags a bit what's being delivered by SUSE. So SUSE's on 15 at the moment. That's our primary code base, but we're lagging behind on SP3, on our version 8 code. Obviously, we'll move to SP4 when we release at the end of the month. That is something to be aware of, not to worry about though, because SUSE manages it, but we're trying to catch up to the latest version because that makes it easier for SUSE, but it shouldn't be relevant to you guys. Just to mention the high level, I'm not going to go through the roadmap in detail, but the things we're really concentrating on is to simplify the day two, your management. SUSE feels quite confident we've done very well at day 0 and day 1. But day 2, we've been a little bit, obviously if you can't build it, there's no point worrying about what comes after, you know. We're really hunkering down and focusing on our networking integrations. So more and more organizations are looking to expand software-defined networking and get beyond just the Neutron in the cloud. They're trying to adopt technologies which help them to move to software-defined networking across all their fabric. And of course, if that's happening, they naturally want to be able to integrate in some way with the Neutron. So the two things are being worked on very heavily. We actually have a dedicated software-defined networking team now. SUSE never had one because everything was done. The engineers are discipline engineers. But we realized after a while it was getting such a big subject and it's so detailed, as you know. If you run any kind of virtualized networking, you learn about networking quite a lot, don't you? The big thing, the really big thing, and you might not have caught this yet, but we're actually doing some technical work at the moment and some tech previews internally to start building out the ability to run the control plane in containers. And that's expected in version 10, but there will be a tech preview for version 9. We are making it public much later in the lifecycle there. It's not the lifecycle of what we call the CCP, the container control plane, CCP. It's going to run separate to the actual versioning. So we're going to beta it whilst 9 is in flight and then be able to coincide the release of it with 10. That will utilize our technologies, but from your point of view as a consumer, we wrap it up and we deliver it to you. So it shouldn't, all that happens is you'll be learning different command lines and different admin, because you've got to debug these things and whatever. But we see great value for customers around that. There's always been a quandary in the SUSE business from a technical point of view that OpenStack is a really traditional workload to allow people to work on web native technology. It's kind of like, get the actual workload a bit more advanced and we can work more effectively. So we're going to standardize monitoring. So we've got Manaska today. Manaska's not going away. It's a very powerful solution. Good thing. But actually not everyone's looking for such a heavyweight solution. So we haven't finalized a plan, but we're looking at Prometheus with Grafana and stuff. So we might do a kind of lightweight monitoring for all the products, which is a similar stack, and then have Manaska as a kind of king of kings monitoring solution that customers can use if they really want that power. Do you use monitoring on the cloud at the moment? You don't. Gets more and more essential if you're containerizing it. So that's why we're really giving it some heavy thought. And of course, we're going to work with all these technologies that are moving down. Kubernetes now, there seems no point in having an OpenStack cloud if you've not got a Kubernetes capability to drive in there as well. There's loads of very, very disruptive technology that's coming in that needs to be enhanced and moved. That slide is there really for reference only. So if you get these slides, I believe they put them up on the internet, so you can at least refer to that. if you've got a particular burning requirement, cross-reference. Who did you work with when you bought OpenStack?
We actually did a deployment through Fuel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're using you're looking at SUSE, so you're not going to upgrade a SUSE version.
I'm interested in the upgrade process because I've seen how bad it can be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of blood on a lot of carpets because of the upgrade process of this stuff. And that's the next point. Okay. Warning, warning, Mr. Robinson. Danger is coming. Okay. Why is it so dangerous? Well, intrinsically, just going from the 6-month version in OpenStack is hard work. And although it has improved a lot upstream over the years, it's still slightly clunky. And I've another full of anecdotes. So a very large, very, very famous British broadcasting organisation who will remain nameless. The clue's in the name. And they were using OpenStack to deliver a lot of their streaming services. And I spoke to them 2.5 years ago, and they were still running Essex. It's like, why? It's just so hard. It's like, you know, there's danger involved. And the reason there's danger involved, it involves hypervisors, Linux, storage, networking. You know, you've got a virtualized data center in software. It's going to be complex. And with SUSE, because we're leaping that version in spring, we don't actually release a Queen's version at all. We go straight to Pike, and then Stein gets missed out. Well, that's an even more complex thing that we feel we should manage for our customers, okay? You've got to account for your storage. You've got to account for your networking. And you've got to support all the emerging technologies at the same time, okay? So the other challenge is naturally, I always make the joke when I'm selling, so as a pre-seller, I go in front of lots of big companies, and I make the phrase, clouds don't shrink. And everyone I want them to react and say, but I'm buying it because it's elastic. Why can't it? I'm like, the services are elastic, but what you'll find is you start using cloud, and it becomes an addiction, and you'll start growing your clouds all the time because the services you can deliver just become huge compared to what you had previously. And with big comes more complication. Okay. So, never fear, SUSE is here. Ta-da! We do complex. So SUSE has always taken complicated things and made them accessible for other people because we are experts around that technology. We were the first ever to come up with a model of a supported Linux. We conceived the idea because we knew there was a market out there that wanted access to open source, but also wanted to work with someone who was that trusted expert, okay? And we've done it ever since. YAST, AutoYAST, ButterFS, kernel patching. We've done all these things to make sure that customers can utilize this very complex technology in an effective way, okay? And we do that with our cloud. SUSE, actually, as a vendor, can support the whole stack. So apart from the tin that was in the graph earlier, or the drawing earlier, apart from the physical tin, we're there. We've got the Linux, and our SUSE OpenStack is built on our Linux. We can manage that section, and we can manage everything up right through the KVM, okay? So, and even the Kubernetes, if you're driving that on top of your layer, or the Cloud Foundry, even if you're going towards platform as a service. We're also pretty experienced at this. 27 years we've been around. That's quite a lot of knowledge around upgrading. And open source moves pretty rapidly. Even the more steady projects move rapidly. So we've got experience. We've got a track record. You can trust us. And this is a really key point. We commit to supporting you during your upgrades, okay? So not everyone, there's actually some funny things in contracts around stuff like that, But SUSE don't hide away from the fact that we know as customers you need us to help you during that danger phase, and we do it. It doesn't mean we'll always be able to deliver things completely click of a button and all automated, because if you think when we go to the control plane, that's going to be so revolutionary, there's going to be the odd outage, so you'll need to use a maintenance window of some description. That hasn't been decided, by the way. That's me just being very open and trusting. So, but we will have to cater for quite a lot of revolution in our versions moving forward. Once we actually get to containerized, then you'll see a situation where, because at the moment in our, it's really interesting stuff for me, but you can run different versions of the project's code sitting side on side in the same cloud. It's great. So it will be really powerful when we get there, but we just have to get there. So we will automate where possible. Okay. Let's go into some details, though. Okay. So I said we can do the whole stack. Well, we can tick a box for the Linux, because the Linux already has an automated upgrade capability. Have you used SUSE Linux Enterprise Server in your business at all? So we've had that facility for a very long time. Powerful upgrade. Reinforcing the fact that we leap the spring update, we've got to face up to the challenge of the fact that we don't want to disrupt the services you're driving in the cloud whilst you're actually upgrading the cloud. We want to avoid that if at all possible. And that means we have to define what non-disruptive means. Okay? So it's a marketing phrase, and what non-disruptive means is for your running services you've already established, they won't blink. So the virtual machines your customers are utilizing as tenants on your cloud will not blink. The APIs very definitely will blink, but you've got a HA stack if you're running in production on your OpenStack, hopefully, and that should help manage that situation. And that's one of the key areas that we go into when we're walking around there. A really big point is one of the challenges you have to take into account is fundamental changes in the technology. So it's been obvious for a while now that although PostgreSQL was quite popular when we got involved in the S6 release of OpenStack all those years ago, sands move, times change, and MariaDB is now becoming a kind of standard. There's still support for PostgreSQL, but we knew that the community's moving towards something, so we needed to manage that. And we've done that upgrade in the 7 and 8 time zone. So we have to take into account that when we're doing our upgrade as well. Because of that, there's some mandatory steps while you do the upgrade process, okay? If you take anything away from this really boring conversation that you're having to put up with me talking to you about, please follow the steps in the documentation. I know we always just try and blast it out as quick as we can, but there are some mandatory steps that will burn you if you don't look at it. It is a complex beast, but once you get there, you should be happy with yourselves. Okay. So let's look at actually the process, the high level. I'm a sales guy, really, so I always talk from a high level down towards the tech. So the very high level, we need HA setup if you want that non-disruptive. If you haven't got HA set up on your control plane, you ain't having non-disruptive upgrades. That's just a binary situation. You're going to have to take down the service whilst you're running it, okay? But presently, in version 7, you're using Pacemaker to run that HA cluster, okay? And we need to take that into account. Whilst you're doing your upgrade, those APIs that drip out, that flip and change, because they do actually stop and start, it's just the nature of how OpenStack's built, those APIs flip onto other services. So we've got the ability to run active-active, And that means we can rely on the fact those services will be available during the upgrade, even though an individual element has gone down in the process, okay? So there will be during the upgrade process on the control plane, you're going to lose access to do certain management tasks of your OpenStack. Be aware of that. So it is a control window. Once you've actually done your control plane, it's plain sailing, yeah? You then can use migration to shift around your virtual machines. So migration came in Liberty, I think. Well, no, it came in earlier, but it became really standardly supported around the Liberty time zone. So we've had quite a while with migration working well. We rely on it in our upgrade process. Obviously, that then shifts the virtual machines and allows those to remain constant for your customers, so the happy people that you're working with. And then you can upgrade all the elements of that machine. It is a complex process. It's just one of those natures. So there's a lot of work that compute host, the workhorse in your cloud, has to go through, but we're able to do it because we've got this live migration post the zone. And then you just wash and repeat. You've done one compute node, you do the next compute node. There's a nice aspect to it that you can actually delay that part of your upgrade. So you can actually get your control plane up to the latest version, SOC 8, and then work through in smaller batches. You can even group sets of the compute nodes and upgrade them in lockstep, in effect, just to take the pain out of the maintenance window, scaring the hell out of everyone in your business, yeah? And it should be you guys flying pretty, okay? But there is devils in their detail, so be aware, okay? Cannot stress that one enough. Please follow the steps. If you don't do things in sequence, you will end up in a very tricky situation, okay? Underlined, sequence, sequence. During the upgrade, you cannot manage VMs in certain, there are one or two things you can do, but actually you're going to lose control as an operator of those virtual machines. So you ain't stopping them, you ain't starting them, you're just leaving them going, and you'll be fine. But luckily, because we automate a lot of this process, it won't be that long that's in effect. We do recommend that particularly the database situation changed from 7 to 8, okay? So we've got to be able to do a supported upgrade, we've actually backported that capability into 7. So the concept of the upgrade is to do the migration of the database in 7 and then do the upgrade to the latest version of OpenStack, okay? So you do the upgrade, and I'll talk to you about how you will run that database upgrade. But get your steps right, and it will work seamlessly.
So how about stack 8 to 9?
8 to 9 won't have a database. So 7 to 8 is unique, and 8 to 9 will be unique. There'll be different challenges. So we freak people out sometimes when we say we don't do the code work for the upgrade process until we've released the product. And some people are like, well, no, I want to know that it works perfect. And you're like, yeah, but until we release the product, we don't know what we have to upgrade. So actually, 9's upgrade capability will come after the release of 9 in a month's time, okay? So it's just, you don't upgrade straight away, so it's a challenge for us, okay? But the database step is important in 7. You need to get to your Galera cluster, which is much more lightweight. The logic there was partly because up until version 7, we were using a pacemaker standard cluster, and that's quite heavy duty. That's a traditional HA open source solution. So it does proper clustering, and that's quite heavy. and it was intruding on the OpenStack, and a lot of our customers were getting freaked out because they were managing the cluster rather than managing OpenStack, and that was quite painful. So the Galera actually have solved quite a lot of that problems with just making sure the VIPs are available and using load balancing over the top and virtual routing across the top. I mean, it's a lot simpler from a management point of view. The code deals, network can change. Yeah, so while you do your upgrade, some of the networking will change, but don't worry, that process actually gets managed by the upgrade process tooling that we've utilized. And always, when you're upgrading, make sure you've got to the latest update profile on the version that you're upgrading, because that's a known state for SUSE. So we test all our upgrading against that known state. So if you leave a load of updates out, there's always a risk, and we don't like risk when we're running services for production. So do be careful on that, okay? And part of the reason I explain here the features. So in SOC 7, running on Liberty, Newton, there wasn't the capability to do the live migration in the upgrade process. That came in Queens. We jumped Queens. So you got a little bit of backporting you need to do to then get back onto the front, and that comes in the form of an update. So it doesn't even work if you don't do certain updates. And there was a similar issue with Cinder migration as well during that process. So your storage layer had some challenges because this concept of online data migration didn't exist in the version of OpenStack we're upgrading, but it's a mandatory, because you've jumped a version. If that version had a mandatory step built into it, you're already further beyond the post. So it is tricky. Please do the updates first. Trying to save support. So anyone know where that is? I'm not expecting you to. It's a lovely little coastal fishing village in England where I have my heart. So that's in a place called Devon in England. It's in the... So I've got a holiday home in that little fishing village. That's why it's photographed up there. I absolutely adore the place. It's I'm old enough to be worrying about my retirement. That's where I want to be when I get there. You're home and dry, right? You've done your control plane from that house and foot. But you haven't done the rest of it. So what do we do? Okay. The VMs are there, so that bit is secure. You've got those VMs working, but you need to update the Linux hypervisor and Nova sitting on your compute nodes. That's the final step. You can delay, you can postpone the updates of those compute nodes because they will still function even if the versions move forward on the core services. And the nice thing is you can group them as well. I think that's a particularly useful capability. So you can pick them off in sets of 5 or whatever as you work. But there are some caveats around that in the documentation. Please do be aware of that and reference it. Should work as normal, but there's 1 or 2 little outlying cases where you'll have to do. So let's quickly focus down on what the steps are that are in the guide. Now, there's a little English joke there. That was an awful band that were around in England a few years ago. They're called Steps. Okay, so these are the steps. I have to explain the joke because there's no British people in the room. If they were here, they'd be laughing because they'll know who Steps are. They were a kind of ABBA-type band that did covers of ABBA and stuff. I'm old enough to remember them. Right. So the steps are, you apply your updates. Okay, make sure that the operating system's up to date as well as your OpenStack. There's 2 things you have to remember there. You need to make sure that your cloud nodes are up and in a ready state. Okay? You can't have elements of this in maintenance mode whilst you're trying to upgrade it. The automation of the process will we'll need them to be in a ready state. So just make sure that's good. Make sure, particularly in the Crowbar version, so from 7 to 8, we use Chef and Crowbar deployer. In that version, you use things called proposals, and those proposals set the configuration state in Chef. Okay? All proposals need to be fully applied that you want to upgrade. Okay? Don't have a half-build cloud and then want to upgrade it. Please finish building the cloud and then upgrade it is really what I'm saying. We need the MariaDB version updated first before the upgrade can take place. Okay? And the HA has to be telling you it's healthy at that point that you go into the upgrade. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the next slide. There's a really useful command line tool here. Crowbar CTL upgrade is how you can drive the upgrade on command line. Of course, we've got GUI capability, but who manages a cloud with a GUI? You know, in reality, nobody does. So the command line tool is really powerful. There's a pre-check switch. If you run the pre-checks, it does flesh out some of the complications, if there are any in there. It's a good pre-check. I would advise using it first just to make sure that you're not having a heart attack in a few hours' time. Or you can use the UI, obviously. So if in the pre-checks, it comes back and says to you that there's a storage issue, you need to get that sorted out. We have run across the odd issue where the Cinder's not configured correctly for the upgrade process. We had to backfill to make sure the updates are on there or whatever. This is not detailed. This is a very high-level view. The documentation goes into the proper detail of this, yeah? But be aware that you have to be careful around the storage of those pre-checks. Another really useful tip in that documentation is a really good reminder to make sure you purge your DBs, okay? There's no point upgrading old information. So clear stuff out and it goes a lot quicker, yeah? And then run the upgrade properly. I say again because it's running the same code, but just don't have the pre-checks bit. And you're good. It's gonna work. We've tested it, and we test it every day in our CI/CD pipelines, of which we've got thousands running all the time. Now, the database migration, I didn't think it was fair to explain to you, you have to do that beforehand. It's not really an upgrade of the version, but it is something you'll have to take into account for if you're running 7 today, okay? The steps are defined. We actually had to build, you wouldn't believe this, so our developers said, right, we're going to move to a new database. There's got to be a migration tool somebody's developed to move to MariaDB from PostgreSQL. There's the odd one, but they were useless. They fell over. So our guys actually built one and put it upstream because it's like, well, we have to do it anyway. So there's this tool, Python, available on Git, Python PSQL to MySQL. And that tool will allow you to be able to automate the migration of data from that database into the MariaDB. You just run the script. It's detailed in the documentation, so go there and get information. But you will only see that script if you run the update that I'm talking about. So make sure you do your updates first. It didn't know it existed when we first built the product. You can draw in a batch file to list out the services you want to run it against, or you can run it just as a full. And the pre-check, again, recommended, do use pre-checks. I'm sure as operators you are aware that you're risking it if you're not doing that, even if it seems a valid shortcut at the time, having been there. So Crowbar CTL upgrade pre-checks will flag out stuff for you. Then you will need to use Knife. So Knife, if you're not using SUSE OpenStack Cloud 7 version, it's a bit confusing. But Knife's actually an element within Crowbar, which then we use to drive Chef. It sounds a bit confusing. Chef's the configuration management, but it can't manage bare metal. So we wrap it in Crowbar, which can manage bare metal. Okay? So the knife command is from Crowbar, and that allows you to SSH onto particular servers and stop services. So that's part of the process that you'll do. Kill off the OpenStack database services that are running, and then you will run a migrate process. It does take time. You'll just have to put it into maintenance and leave it moving across, but it doesn't stop the services running that are actually the VMs, etc., in the background, so it's useful. Then you have an extra little bit of configuration. So you've got to then go in and make sure that the back end is flipped. So it's not flipped until you apply this Crowbar setting. And at that point, you say to OpenStack, right, your new manager is running on this database, right, MariaDB database. But as I say, everything is detailed in the documentation, so it will be your friend in this. So there is a little step where you will have to restart the Chef client just to clean up in the background. So there is a little bit of manual go on, do some process flipping, and then it will pick up the new database once your settings defined. Obviously, it's running in memory. You've got to kill it to get it to pick it up. I put this slide in here just as an extra informational for you. So I talked a bit about the fact we're running to control plane. And as possible customers to the technology, are you guys using SUSE OpenStack Cloud? Or? Yeah. You are? Yeah, it's an important thing. So at the moment we're here, we're still supporting our deployers. You can either use an Ansible deployer or a Chef-based deployer in our version 9. Fully supported. The Helion brand disappears. So we had to keep Helion. That was part of the agreement with HPE. HPE have turned around and said, we're not going to hold you to that contractual obligation anymore because they're not worried whether the brand still exists, but they were back in the day. So we're just moving to SUSE OpenStack Cloud. That is what it will be moving forward. At this time, we're going to run a parallel evaluation around the containerized control plane. If you're into your projects in OpenStack, we're using Airship. Airship is really an edge compute play from the telcos. So I think NTT maybe set it up back in the day. It's quite orientated to edge compute solutions. But what we found looking at it is actually it's going to be quite a nice little vehicle to piggyback to get containerization into the control plane. So SUSE is doing quite a lot of work upstream on the Airship to morph its use case for us or widen the use case so we can utilize it. It's quite an interesting technology. And that will move us across. The intention is in a year's time when we release Cloud 10. Who can believe 2020 is only a year away? That's remarkable. We will just consolidate. So we will drop the Ansible and the control, the Crowbar deployer and management layer because you won't need it anymore because Airship will be utilizing Kubernetes to drive the cloud. So the whole concept of driving via a standardized configuration management tool goes away when you're using Airship. That's the value of it. Does that make sense? Okay. So, yeah, we're going to change, just stressing that we're going to change the deployers. We'll give you a upgrade path, but we're not there to plan it out as yet because we're still, releasing the code as we're talking. And it might be disruptive, okay? So you might have to put your cloud into maintenance to get to that ideal state of containerization. We expect that will, once we are at the containerized process, that you will become much more flexible in upgrades. So this comment I made earlier about running different versions, parallel and stuff like that, everything that we've investigated so far on the Airship points us towards the understanding that we're really going to be very flexible on upgrade paths once we're at that point. And that's part of the value of why we're bringing it forward. Should make customers' lives a lot easier. Although it might make our support lives hard, but it's going to make your lives a lot easier. So at the moment, we're running an Ansible that is an OpenStack Ansible, and Chef and Crowbar, which the OpenStack community got fed up with at some point and moved really towards OpenStack Ansible. So we're not really aligned with the upstream in the work that we're doing, which is a bit daft when we're an upstream organisation. So we want to back that out. That's part of the rationale for why we're doing this. And containerization of the control plane is bound to come. You know, it's already there in some distributions, and more organizations are looking at doing it. So it's just going with change at the end of the day as well. Okay, so quick summary. We're nearly at the end, guys. You can go and relax after this, because I'm pretty sure this is the last session of the day, isn't it? So, upgrading SOC. Okay, what do we do? So it needs to happen. So you can't get all the sexy widgets to work if you don't upgrade your platform, okay? That's the biggest selling point. When your customer comes to you and says, I need this project to function perfectly well, you're like, that's not quite what I want to do. But you've got to move forward with change. We are people who deal with complexity to reduce the complexity in your lives. You need to worry about other things than what we worry about. Yeah, that's why you pay us money. You're going to have to follow the guides. Can't stress it enough. That's another point about the test jobs we do. The test jobs, by definition, run through the manual. That's how we build our test jobs. So if you avoid running through the manual, you're going to have a different state. And that's always a bit scary. So, you know, can't stress it enough. Do all the prep we ask. Running the pre-checks and clearing out databases and stuff will help you in the overall process. It might seem a bit of an extra effort, but in the long run, it will save you time. And because of that, it will save you worry, because as an operator, I know what it's like. I've been there. While things are working, you're panicking because you're always concerned they're not going to come back. Well, give yourself a break, is what I'm saying. And remember, we treat the storage and the database challenge on version 7 to 8 as separate things. So don't expect the update process to fully manage and automate those elements. You have to do those yourself to then be able to get up to the latest version. You can also deal with the compute, the workhorses, as an afterthought. Okay, so I know what it's like trying to get change windows through and all the negotiation and politicking you go through there. So if you need to squeeze your time that you're actually in a change state, you can do that utilizing the tools that we've built. So it's a bit of a download for you lads, as seen as there's only 3 of you in the room, but any questions? So thank you very much for putting up with me. It's been a pleasure. Good luck in your OpenStack journeys, whatever you decide. We are a wonderful company to work with if you would like to.